Imagine this. You're driving along a road. The sun is slowly descending toward the horizon, and you're doing everything you can to hold on to that golden moment. But what if I told you that you could extend the sunset as long as possible, even for hours? Sounds impossible, right? Well, today we're about to answer a fascinating question. What's the longest possible sunset you can experience while driving? Assuming you're obeying the speed limit and driving on paved roads. Buckle up because the answer might just surprise you. This question comes from Michael, who asks, what's the longest sunset you can experience while driving, assuming you're obeying the speed limit and driving on paved roads? To answer this, we first need to clarify what we mean by sunset. For the purpose of this question, sunset begins when the sun first touches the horizon and ends when it disappears completely. So let's be clear. This is not a sunset. This is also not a sunset. And this definitely doesn't count as a sunset. For a sunset to truly qualify, it must set behind the idealized horizon. It can't simply disappear behind a hill, a rock, or any other obstacle. Otherwise, we could make the sun set whenever we wanted by just hiding behind something. Now that we have a clear definition, let's look at the average sunset durations around the world. At the equator, a typical sunset lasts just over 2 minutes. But in places like London, England, the sunset can take a bit longer, usually around 3 to 5 minutes. Why the difference? Well, it's because the Earth's surface is moving at around 1,000 kilometers at London's latitude. This movement is crucial, as it explains why you can potentially experience a longer sunset by flying instead of driving. Here's the thing. If you hop on a commercial airliner and fly west, you can actually extend your sunset indefinitely. That's because as the airplane moves westward, it effectively keeps up with the sun, allowing you to enjoy the sunset as long as the fuel lasts. Around 15 to 20 hours of constant sunset until you eventually run out of gas. But Michael's question is about driving, so let's focus on that. Intuitively, you might think that the farther north or south you go, the easier it would be to keep up with the sun. After all, the closer you are to the poles, the more the sun lingers around the horizon during certain times of the year. However, there's a problem. There are no paved roads near the poles. The closest you can get is Longyearbyen on the island of Spitsbergen, Norway, where the longest sunset lasts just under 1 hour. But even there, driving west isn't a viable option. The roads are simply too short, and even if you did drive west, the sun would still set too quickly for you to keep up with it. Even at the northernmost tip of mainland Norway, to keep up with the sun, you would have to drive at nearly half the speed of sound, which of course is not practical by car. But don't worry, there's a much better way to experience a longer sunset if you find yourself in northern Scandinavia. If you're there on a day when the sun barely sets before it begins to rise again, you've got the perfect opportunity. Here's the strategy. You wait in your car until the sun just begins to touch the horizon. This marks the moment when the daylight line is about to pass. Once the sun starts setting, drive north to stay ahead of the daylight line. This will keep the sun in the process of setting, making the sunset last much longer. When the sun begins to rise again, make a U-turn and head south, crossing the daylight line into night. By doing this, you're extending the sunset as much as possible. I ran a search using PFM code and GPS data from Norwegian highways to explore long sunset driving paths. This strategy works anywhere inside the Arctic Circle, regardless of the route or driving speed. The longest sunset I could consistently get was about 95 minutes, which is roughly 40 minutes longer than what you'd experience in Longyearbyen. Now, if you're stuck on Spitsbergen and want to make the sunset or sunrise last just a little longer, here's a fun, albeit impractical idea. Spin counterclockwise. By doing so, you'd theoretically slow down the Earth's rotation ever so slightly, adding a tiny fraction of a nanosecond to the day. While this will not make a noticeable difference, it's a quirky idea worth considering, if you're into fun physics experiments. To sum it up, the longest sunset you can experience while driving is about 95 minutes in northern Scandinavia, specifically within the Arctic Circle. While it's not quite like flying west in a plane, this strategy allows you to enjoy the sunset much longer than you could ever by just driving west. And while you can't quite slow the Earth's rotation, it's still fun to imagine how we might tweak the laws of physics for a longer day. If you enjoyed this deep dive into sunsets and science, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more thought-provoking content. Let us know in the comments what impossible scenario should we explore next.